All right, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 minute. We're waiting for everybody to join us as we are all breaking for lunch. I'm really excited about the topic today, too. All right, we still have a few more people rolling in, so give us just 1 second. I'm going to be going on mute here in a moment, but I think we're ready to get started. All right, welcome everybody. I am so excited that you are able to join us today as we kick off our Leadership Month. Improving has weekly virtual lunch and learn talks, so you can join us here every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central to learn more. And as noted, this month is going to be entirely focused on leadership. Mark Runyon is our speaker today and will get us kicked off. We're going to be talking about effective feedback for greater leadership impact. Next week, we'll be pivoting over to crucial conversations, leading with emotional intelligence, and then following with a number of other great talks. As we progress today, I just want to remind everybody that you will be able to ask questions and get answers in real time. I encourage you to use the question and answer box provided by Zoom at the bottom of your screen on that bottom ribbon. Or if you'd like to ask your question in person, feel free to raise your hand within the participants pane of Zoom, and I'll take you off mute so you can ask in real time. All right. Well, without further ado, let me turn it over to Mark. Mark is a personal friend of mine. We've worked together on a number of leadership campaigns, and he runs our own internal leadership program, helping scale up so improvers all over the United States, Canada, and Mexico can gain better leadership skills and truly become the leaders that they need to within our organization and for our clients. Mark, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Thank you, Emily. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you all for joining me today for effective leadership for greater leadership impact. Great to have you all here. I appreciate you carving out an hour of your day to come join us for a leadership talk. So this talk very much is geared towards that leadership audience, but I consider giving and receiving feedback just essential for any professional. When you kind of think about the trajectory of your career and what you want to see for yourself, leadership should be a very critical component of helping you get there and helping you access these places you want to go. As Emily said, we have a great lineup coming this coming month of March. Fantastic speakers, great topics from beginning to end. Next week, Bethany Hilton is going to be covering Crucial Conversations, Leading with Emotional Intelligence. It's a fantastic book, one that has definitely influenced my approach towards leadership, as well as how to have tough conversations and do them well. So we'll actually see pieces of that kind of cropping up today during our feedback conversation. In 2 weeks, on the 20th, Daniel Scheffler is looking at the necessary discipline of leaders. So essentially patterns of discipline and the nuances there within. And then on the 27th, Tanya and Lynn join us for Leading with Agility. So that dive into the art of inspiring and influencing others through collaboration and support, and kind of looking at those agile tools and how we can boost our leadership presence through those. So All of these are up on improving.com right now. You can access it through the thoughts menu and webinars and register for all of them as we speak. So please join us for the weeks ahead. They are always free, always virtual. So great chance for you to continue your learning journey. So a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Mark Runyon. I am a vice president of consulting through our Atlanta office. My focus is really on people. How can we help people find fulfillment? How can we provide them a place to grow? How can we make this, truly a great place to work that people want to grow their careers and see themselves kind of through this company. Also through our Atlanta enterprise, I head up our delivery efforts. So how do we deliver quality for our clients? How do we help set expectations? How do we follow through on the promises that we make and do that well? Also, I head up the employee growth effort through the Office of CCO, which has been a interesting journey for me. Trying to map out the strategy and execution of our Path career coaching program, as well as scaling up and figuring out what is the next what's the next step of our leadership journey look like for our improvers. It's been a cool journey and one that I've loved being a part of. But given both of these roles, feedback is very important in my day-to-day. I'm having multiple conversations in this space on a daily, weekly basis. So this is a place where I've had to level up and get better. So it's been fun. So turning to our topic of the day, feedback. Why feedback? Why is this a critical skill for leaders? Essentially, we all, as leaders, as managers, have business objectives that we need to achieve. We have goals that we are striving for, and we have to let people know when are we on track? Where do we need to pivot? We need to give that guidance and that feedback to allow our teams to maximize their efforts. Time is finite. How can we help them grow skills? How can we make sure they're on the right track? It's very essential. Secondly, people crave feedback. People really want to know where they stand. One of the things I hear most from people within my organization, organizational structure, or on my account is, how am I doing? People really want to know where they stand. We need to find ways to give that feedback in every chance that we can along the way. It's essential for employee growth. Again, kind of going back to the last slide, we would need to help people find their potential. No one should ever have to guess at which actions are valuable or where they took a misstep. We should be very transparent about those things and providing that feedback. And the reality is, absence of feedback, people are going to wing it. They're just going to do their best and hopefully they fall in the right place. I personally am guilty of this at times myself. Taking the initiative, practicing self-management. These are highly prized things, within management and leadership. I've got to trust that my team can take the reins so that I don't turn into a bottleneck to them getting things done. Yet too much of a good thing can work against us. Without stopping occasionally, just say, how are things going? Am I on the right track? We need that to ensure that alignment, to make sure that we haven't strayed from the core vision inadvertently, or if we just spent a whole lot of time running down this wrong path. It is kind of a balancing act, I will admit, but one we have to kind of feel out. So, and don't take my word for it as far as the importance of feedback. I've gathered a bunch of numbers here to kind of support my argument. So these statistics come from industry surveys, research studies, and I thought they'd be a good one to start our conversation and a good set of numbers to dive into. So 60% of survey respondents wanted feedback on a daily or a weekly basis. 69% of employees say they would work harder if they felt their efforts were recognized. 92% of respondents agreed that giving negative feedback in the right way can improve performance. 41% of employees left a job because they felt they weren't listened to. 37% of managers felt uncomfortable giving feedback about an employee's performance when they might respond negatively. So in the collective, what all of these numbers tell me is that most organizations struggle with feedback and struggle to do it effectively. Essentially, we all need to do better. So my goal is for us to leave here today and make progress. All these little pain points that we have that are affecting all of us. So that's our goal. Let's see how far we get. So probably first and foremost, we need to look at the question of why is good feedback so difficult anyways? So for some, they worry about how the feedback is going to be received. That's fair. This can be a very risky space. If we leave people feeling unappreciated and feeling like they're not being heard, then ultimately we're leaving them feeling not valued. It is critical that we approach these conversations in the right way. There was another statistic that I didn't include that it was a very high percentage of people that had come out of negative feedback conversations and start looking for another job. We have to make sure that we deliver these conversations in the right way, where they can create problems bigger than the ones that we were trying to solve. Next, power dynamics. If I tell my manager how I really feel, will they hold it against me? Maybe I'll lose my job. Yeah, that's concerning. Problems with confrontation. So some of us really would rather not have that conversation. If I don't address it, then maybe it'll just go away. I will tell you from past experience that usually does not happen. It usually just gets worse. It just kind of festers and grows. So we do have to get comfortable with that confrontation to be able to take these things on. For some of us, we have deficient communication skills. This is a skill that we have to develop like any other. It takes practice and preparation to do this well. So don't kid yourself by thinking that people are just naturally born giving good feedback. This is something we all have to work at. And then lastly, vague feedback. This is almost the equivalent of not giving feedback at all. We need to be specific. We need to be actionable in our feedback. And also, when we look at those challenges, we have to challenge our remote feedback as well. The Better.com CEO, it was like a year and a half ago, laid off 900 people of his workforce on Zoom right before the holidays. No one had ever heard of this guy before. But after that, he was the worldwide poster child of being someone devoid of emotional intelligence, someone who lacked empathy. Poor feedback in the remote hybrid age can go sideways very quickly on us. And to set the tone here, I'm a very huge fan of hybrid work. I have an hour drive to the office each way. My days at home are some of the most productive, but my time in the office is extremely valuable as well, because it is so much easier to help build those stronger relationships face to face. It's not that it can't be done remotely, but it is more difficult. Things get easily lost in translations. The spontaneous conversations don't happen as much. I have to actually engineer them or put time on somebody's calendar. There's a lot to be said for that face-to-face interaction. And we can find ourselves, the context can be challenging. We find ourselves overly reliant on communication channels like email, text, chat, and even video calls. And the further we get away from face-to-face communication, our message starts losing some of that meaning. Misunderstandings start creeping in. And that's where we really have to be careful giving feedback in a remote or more hybrid environment. An example of this came up, it was probably a few months ago. One of my team members was transitioning to a new role. So I was working with him to figure out, what do we need to cover? What do we need to transition over to the client and train them on? What do we need to document? What's our plan for some of this other work that's not ready for transition? I'm multitasking. It's a Monday morning. I've got meetings going on. I'm not really paying as much attention to this Teams conversation, maybe as I should be. I'm feeling a little bit of pushback from the other person, but I'm thinking we just need to get this stuff scheduled. We need to get moving on these, various things. And so as I continue to kind of softly push, I hit a point where this person comes back to me and is like, you're phasing me out. You're taking away my job. I'm like, hold on. That's not my intention. Let's hop on a quick Teams call real quick so I can clarify what we're trying to do here. It's not that at all. We're trying to make sure the client's in a good place, make sure improving's in a good place, and make sure you're in a good place so that you feel supported in this new role and that you don't feel like you have to, just put your arms around the world and take care of everything. That's the intent. And that's what got lost in this communication, that we weren't being thorough enough. So that my call here is we need to be careful in this space. It's not that we can't give feedback in a remote or a hybrid environment, but we just have to be a little bit more deliberate in how we come about it. Maybe have some of these more critical conversations on a Zoom call or something where there's less spaces for people to kind of fill in the blanks where that information may not be available. So looking at some traits of effective feedback, I would always say a good rule of thumb is to imagine you're on the other side of this table. How would you want feedback to be delivered to you? When we're able to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, we can be more empathetic to what their situation is. What emotions are we potentially going to trigger through this conversation? What's going on in their head when they hear this feedback? We can start getting that 360-degree view of this conversation, and we can be more sensitive to some of those issues, and we can make sure that we are creating this safe space, which is very critical for having, especially some of these more difficult conversations. So first thing is timeliness. I've had this happen before, where someone would come up to me and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about that thing 2 weeks ago." I'm like, what are you talking about? 2 weeks ago seemed like a lifetime ago in my world. I can't think of any of the specifics or what was happening then. And this very much applies when we are giving feedback. It needs to be timely so we can keep it relevant. We need to address the behavior while it's fresh in our minds and fresh in their minds, so that we can help reinforce that positive behavior that we want to see more of, or that we can correct those areas where we need to see improvement. And it's that awareness can really help stop some of those mistakes that are happening and keep them from happening over and over again, giving us that opportunity for improvement. And we also need this clarity. When we delay feedback, we trigger those misunderstandings. We cause confusion. The specific behaviors are a little bit out of reach. It's easy to forget exactly what was happening a week ago, or I can start misattributing in my mind, or I can remember it differently than it actually happened. So we need to be careful and not kind of letting that get away for us. And in performance management situations, this becomes really important as people are driving towards performance goals. They need to know, when am I hitting the mark? When do I need to adjust my behaviors? Setting that correct expectation with them helps them achieve the goals that they're going for, and doesn't give them that delay and doesn't get them off course in what they're trying to achieve. So there is one big caveat here. Being timely doesn't mean that you have to have the conversation before you're ready. Sometimes it's hugely helpful to take a step back from the situation, gather your facts. Sometimes you need to cool off. Maybe you need to just arrange your thoughts before just jumping into the conversation. That's time well spent. And that is worth the slight delay. But it is usually a delay of an hour or maybe a day. It's not a delay in a week. We still want to kind of keep it timely and make sure we're delivering that feedback the right way. So next, we want to promote dialogue. So another story here. This was probably a year plus ago. I had a team member in my organization. He was on a client, and he had gotten sideways. Things were not going well. He had had some behavior that was out of character, and we needed to get it resolved like immediately. The client was very frustrated. They're about to roll him off. Strangely enough, I did not do the prep that I normally do before going into that conversation, and I very much paid for it. I go in, I define the facts, I go into solutioning mode. I never let this other person speak. We ended up landing on a good outcome, but my approach was beyond awful. I cringe just thinking about it. Essentially, I did not show mutual respect. My approach came off as very condescending, like I did not care about their opinion, which is not the case. I did end up circling back and I apologized. I walked them through the conversation that we should have had, but it really highlights the danger that if we don't take the time to prepare and work on promoting dialogue, we can do a lot of damage in these situations. So promoting dialogue really is about fostering that collaborative environment, saying, I value your opinion. I like to say kind of after we get through that facts phase, what are your thoughts on this? Give me your perspective. Because there's always two sides of every story. So I want to hear where you're coming from. And let's have a good dialogue on this and not be me dictating and telling you how things should be. That helps us enhance our understanding of what happened here. Where do we stand? And this issue of ownership and accountability. If we're at this at the situation where we need to put together an action plan where somebody needs to improve, if they don't own that improvement plan, there's little chance of it actually being followed through with and us making any real progress. So we need this dialogue. We need that buy-in to happen for us to make any headways on these issues. And lastly, I mentioned it before, we want to build that safe and supportive environment. We need people feeling comfortable about sharing their ideas and not afraid of what's going to happen if they speak their truth. This is very important in these situations. Next, we want to be balanced. So we have this at Improving, we have this quick review process where every 6 months you should be getting client feedback on your performance. What I sit down with the client, what is going well, where can this person improve, and then I relay this feedback back to them. So this is one from a few years ago that I got from the client. This person was delivering innovative designs many times on the spot. You were called out for going above and beyond and visiting the client's site to help them out with the production and release last week. The one call out they had for improvement was just to show more client presence, just be more talkative in meetings, asking more curious questions to get at that underlying client need. What are your thoughts on this feedback? So that's kind of a very balanced approach. So we are giving the positive, here are the great things that you've been doing, that call out, as well as here's something constructive that they provided. And this is kind of how I like to approach these feedback sessions. And I do call out the client on this of like, can you give us one thing that my team member can do better? Because that's the one call out that I usually get when I just shower them with praise through this exercise is, well, isn't there anything that I can do better? Again, people crave feedback. People want to know where they stand. So it really is that balance, and it doesn't really have to always be that compliment sandwich that we hear about. If I'm consistently relaying, feedback, usually probably heavily positive if this person is doing well, then when we sit down and talk about an area of improvement, it shouldn't come off as threatening. I've worked to develop that trust. We've developed a relationship where we can have an honest conversation around improvement, and it doesn't come off as an attack, or if it doesn't come off as my intention is anything other than in the right place. And many times this comes down to packaging as well. I've walked out of client review sessions where the review on the team member was scathing to the point of not being helpful at all. I had to sit down and sanitize that message before I could deliver it to my colleague because it wasn't helpful. The underlying intent of the client's message was the same, but it came from a place that was overly critical. It was discouraging. These conversations need to be productive so we can drive positive change. So we need to make sure they're packaged in the right way. Specific. So this one came up, it was a month or two ago. One of our team members had done some great work, and this was the feedback to them. I appreciate the work you did with the Vancouver team to create the new Azure service offering for our partner network. That was a huge win for the sales team, and you were critical in delivering that win. Thank you for putting in the additional hours to make that happen. So hearing that feedback, say that was you. Do we think that you would be inclined to do this thing again? I mean, I would say likely. We've kind of highlighted what the value of that action was. We're showing appreciation. We're really giving the feedback of what that follow through looks like for the business and how you helped out the greater good of that action. So it is clear, it's concrete. I'm sure we've all been in those feedback situations where the person on the other side of the table is just consistently dancing around the topic and not actually giving you feedback or not actually having an ask. That vague feedback can be very confusing and it can border on worthless. What is the point? Well, why are we even going through this exercise? In the motivational aspect, people are more likely to continue showing those positive behaviors when we're regularly highlighting the value and seeing kind of what the fruits of those achievements. Next, we want to be objective. So my story for this one, this was a few years ago. In my world, there are certain times when things have gotten so bad, the client comes up to me and says, this team member is rolling off today. We are done. We have gone past, the bridge has been burned. There is no more conversation around this topic. This person is done. So I get to go deliver that message. And so in this certain instance, this was actually one of the first times I had done this exercise. I go to this team member and I say, hey, client said you're rolling off today. You didn't show up for a meeting last week. You've been frequently late on your deliverables. There is no discussion here. You're wrapping up. So, use this as a learning experience. We'll get you over to the team to get reassigned. But what are your thoughts? What's going on in your head when you hear this? The first thing he comes back to me with is, which meeting did I miss? All my deliverables have been on time. So the learning for me in this exercise was my statements lacked specifics. I should have tracked down which meeting that was that he missed. I should have figured out which deliverables he was deficient on. Believe me, I've not made that mistake since. A lot of times our facts end up being hollow when they lack those specifics. We also need to be aware of our personal biases and assumptions. Again, awareness that we have them. We're not always aware of what those biases are, but we can really easily fall prey to them if we're not conscious of them being there. So when we go to get at the facts, I like to survey multiple sources when possible. Whenever we can keep this from turning into a he said, she said type situation, we are better off because it can devolve there quickly.
Mark,
Yes.
we had a question on the last slide. The question was really centered around if somebody is giving you vague, non-actionable feedback, how could you, as the person receiving that information, help turn the conversation towards more actionable feedback? Or how does somebody ask for more actionable feedback?
Right. I actually have a slide on that one, as a matter of fact, coming up. But essentially, it's about clarifying questions. So how can we get more information? Let's dig deeper into, great, I heard you say this. I'd love to find out more information. Let's dig into that a little bit more. Can you explain some specifics around ways I can improve, specifics around kind of what's behind that? So you helping drive the conversation and get it to a better point. So everything we've led up to thus far is giving feedback to another person. But the reality is there's a lot of situations where we're the one receiving feedback from somebody who may not give feedback as well as we should. So in that instance, we have to help develop the conversation that's not going to happen on its own. We're going to have to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to have to ask some more powerful questions and get at the outcome that we ultimately want to see from the discussion. It becomes our responsibility in those situations. We are leading where we're at in that situation, and not necessarily relying on whoever's leading the conversation to take it where we ultimately want it to go. So, that work? All right, so shifting over to behavior focused. We've talked a couple times about creating that safe space to have these conversations. When we target someone's personality, someone's character, we are seriously taking the wrecking ball to that safe space. That feedback can come off as an attack. People get naturally defensive, rightfully so. So if we can center the conversation around the behavior, we're targeting something that's inherently malleable. We're not tying our feedback into the thing of who someone is. And that's a space that we can work within, and something that we can make progress on. And then lastly, from a traits that we should be showing for positive, more effective feedback is being continuous about our feedback. So if you're doing feedback once a year, once a quarter, once a month, you're doing it wrong. Feedback should be a continual process that's as close to real time as possible. When we approach feedback in this way, our positive feedback should naturally outweigh our negative feedback because it's happening much more frequently, and it's allowing us to build this very productive, positive relationship on trust, so that it allows us to have the space to have some of those tougher conversations when the time comes. And it's not. I've heard this from somebody that I was not working with on either a organizational or an engagement standpoint. I had to have one of these tough conversations with them, and they said, "Oh no, if you're calling me, this can't be good." We hadn't had the space to kind of build up a productive relationship, so that when he says, "Oh no, the VP is calling me," then I must have done something really wrong. That's what we're trying to get away from. Where we're trying to make sure that that regardless of what conversation we're having, it's being viewed in the right light of whether it be positive or negative. So, lastly, these stronger relationships allow us, we foster this space that we can have a flow of feedback going both ways. So we've really much targeted this feedback kind of in one direction, but that should not be the case. Really, if we've fostered this good space, then the other person should be equally giving us feedback as the leader as to how we can get better and what that looks like. And we should be learning from that. We should be, internalizing that and developing our own action plans about how we can get better and how we can be more positive in our interactions with people. Every person is different. So every person's going to receive that feedback a little bit differently. So we do have to have some tailoring. We have to kind of figure out what speaks to this person, but not to this person, and develop our approach based off of, what works for certain people, and not take the one size fits all, the hammer to the screw type approach, and just hopefully that it works. Because unfortunately, it kind of sets us up for disaster down the line. All right, so for these conversations, we really need to, especially the complex or difficult conversations, feedback conversations, preparation is very much key. We need to think about the construction of this conversation. What is our approach? What is our ultimate goal? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we clear on what our messaging is? Are we creating that safe space to have a good dialogue? All of these are very important questions to figure out long before we ever get into the situation. Dry run the conversation, whether it be in your head or with someone else. How does this conversation flow? Where does it logically go to? What responses might come back from the other person? Am I ready to speak to each one of those responses that might be coming back? Also, the nerves. A lot of us who have not done this a lot, this is an intimidating space, and rightfully so. There's some confrontational angles here to this. So I will tell you this: the more you do this, the easier it gets. You get more comfortable, you get more confident navigating in this space. And until you do get to that point, my suggestion is like breathing exercises, visualization exercises. There are things that help you diffuse the nerves and to get past this so that you feel comfortable walking into these conversations, uncomfortable though they may be. Also, this right here, your preparation, just like giving a talk to someone, like a public speaking engagement. The more you prepare, the more mentally ready you're going to be to have this talk. So there's none of that panic of, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to say in the moment. You've prepared. All your ducks are in a row. You're ready to go have this conversation. So it does take away some of the sting around the fear about having it. So when we're having these conversations, we need to be very active in trying to spot how is this feedback being received? We've tried to create the safe space, but is it still safe? Are we trending in a less than ideal direction? Are we showing empathy? Are we acknowledging the discomfort of the situation? Are we focused on solution? Do we need to take a break if needed? I've run into those situations where it's just like, I clearly, you need to decompress a little bit before we kind of continue on with this. So let's press pause, come back to this later in the day, tomorrow, what have you, because that's the right course of action for that given time. So if we're starting to see these things, we need to start being careful. We need to probably step back and figure out, okay, we've exited the safe space. So what do we need to do to kind of rebuild? So someone's getting defensive. They're not open to the perspective that I'm bringing to the table. You're disrupting their worldview, and that can be a really hard thing to accept. So we need to be careful with that. Somebody shutting down. Remember, we want to create dialogue. This is the opposite. People are not talking. So this is not going to be productive, what we're trying to do. Again, how can we get back to that safe space? Blaming others. Others may have played a part in whatever this thing was, but what was your role? What's the thing that you can own and you can get better at? That's what I want from you. That the person that got let go off the account, that's what I wanted to hear from him. I'm owning this thing that I did wrong, and I'm pledging to get better going forward. It's okay to have questions. Maybe somebody else did play a part. That's fine. You can't do anything else. You can't do anything to change their behavior. The only person you can change the behavior of is yourself. So having that ownership, committing to doing better. Lastly, nonverbal cues, the body language, facial expressions, tone of voice. Again, this can get tricky when we're not face to face, not on a Zoom call. Even on a Zoom call, we can lose some of those aspects as well. So we have to be careful to kind of see the things that are happening inside someone, not necessarily just the words that are coming out of their mouth. And so all of these things, we kind of need to take that step back, reassess the safety of the situation, and see how we can improve it. So if you guys want to go deeper into this topic, please check out Bethany's talk next week on Crucial Conversations. That is kind of housed for this thing in particular. There are great pieces that can help us navigate this space really, really well. So I always recommend getting into the habit of learning after any of these experiences we have, feedback here being the one we're focused on. Game film that conversation after you have it. What went well? What would I have done differently? What can I learn from this experience to get better? It helps create that awareness that if we do this exercise over and over and over again, we can review those areas of improvement before going into the next conversation, and we continually refine our approach until we get to a point where we're delivering the most effective feedback that we can possibly give. And also, don't lose track of the gratitude side of things. People are doing fantastic things around you every single day. How many times are you calling out those great things that are happening? Start by cataloging those opportunities. Where did you call out that praise? Where did you miss one? If we can start creating that awareness, create habits around it, then we can develop deliberate practices around giving feedback in the moment so that we don't miss those really valuable opportunities to call out the great things that our team members are doing. And next, on the topic of gratitude, it shouldn't just be the verbal. We should try to get creative. What are some other ways we can show appreciation for those great things that people do? At Improving, we have lots of different ways that we show gratitude, because we realize that our people are some of the sharpest in the industry. They can work literally anywhere. So we need to go above and beyond to show that gratitude, to make sure that they are happy, and make sure that they want to continue to grow with us. So here's a few things that came to mind when I was putting together this slide. Last Thursday night, we rented out the local theater here in Alpharetta to go see Dune the night before it was released, and invited all the families, did a drawing for some Dune prizes, and it was a lot of fun. And it was a great way to just say thanks for the great things that you all do every day. Improving 100 is something we introduced last year, recognizing the 100 improvers that made the biggest impact in the previous year and sending them and their +1 to Cancun for 4 days. Very, very cool initiative and trip. The monetary side of things, raises, profit shares. How are we sharing in our success and making sure that that people feel like they are a part of the success and they are a critical piece of it. Compensating certifications. For those who want to grow their skills, we want to make sure that we reimburse them for the certifications that they get. There are times when we have partnership goals around certain certifications. Well, let's make sure we give them our people bonuses when they help us out with those partnership goals. And then lastly, by far the easiest, but by the least creative of them is just to say thank you. The easiest thing we can do is just showing that appreciation. I'm very thankful how you make us better. That's the one we can do on a daily basis. So the call out here is really just don't overlook the creative ways that we can show our people, give them that feedback that we value them and they are important to us. So switching gears here a little bit, as leaders, we have to recognize that feedback is a two-way street. We can't effectively give feedback if we don't know how to receive it. So we need to be open to that feedback. We need to learn from it, and we need to ultimately get better from it. So this is kind of two sides of the same coin. It is about perspective. So we should be practicing these things when we're giving feedback as well. So first among them being active listening. So the seeking to understand before being understood. Essentially, we're focusing very intently on what the other person is saying. We want to understand what is on their mind. What did they come to us with? What's not being said? There's usually a thread that runs underneath the conversation. Let's pull on that thread and let's see where that goes. This understanding is very critical in feedback situations. Showing engagement, that eye contact, the affirmations, mirroring body language, blocking out the world, turning off my phone, my watch, email dinging over here. It is not just, waiting for your turn to speak. That's what I think of traditional conversation, but really hearing the other person and digesting what they're saying so that we can come back with a response that shows the other person that we care about their perspective. Their voice is important and they've ultimately been heard. There's a lot to be said for that. And so circling back to our previous question, we need to ask clarifying questions. We need to help refine what's coming in from the other person. How can we enhance the dialogue? How can we prevent misunderstanding by asking the other person to clarify their statement? It can be as simple as saying, hey, let's dig into that a little bit more because I want to make sure I'm understanding you. It's taking that to the next level. So again, you're setting yourself up for success in that conversation and not waiting for the other person to deliver it. And it may not come. So we have to meet people where they're at, realize their limitations. Maybe they have their own communication hurdles they have to get by, but that doesn't really necessarily help you out. So take the conversation where you want to go. Also, this helps us encourage dialogue. The other person feels heard. And lastly, maybe most importantly, it stops the stories. So when we receive feedback, it usually comes with significant gaps included in it. Our head does not like gaps. We are going to want to complete that story. So if we don't ask the clarifying questions, we start telling ourselves a narrative that may not reflect reality. And that can be a very dangerous place to be. I know I've completed the narrative a few times in my head to the place where I was like, I'm about to go find a new job because I think something's happening that was not. Thankfully, and usually all of those circumstances, I've reached out to the person in question and saying, hey, you need to clarify this real quick or or something's going to happen. And they all turned it out to be me not understanding what was happening and just telling a story and blowing something completely out of proportion or something that wasn't actually there. But we have to be careful in this space and we have to help ourselves and make sure that we understand. Next, we want to practice a growth mindset. So this idea of growth versus fixed mindset, fixed being innate talent. I'm born with this. There's no learning that really needs to happen versus a growth mindset of this is a skill that we're growing over time. This is something I need to develop. This idea of failure is a means to learn. So not being afraid of failure, seeing failure as a very critical element to your learning and growth. It's something we all need to experience. That fixed mindset sees failure as a stop sign or a roadblock. I'm not good at that thing, so I'm going to stop doing it. I'm going to find something else that I am good at. Feedback being essential for growth. Those operating in a fixed mindset hate feedback. It is cutting into your self-view. You see it as an attack that you have to defend yourself against. So again, having that openness to growth, having that mindset and kind of viewing how you view the world, how you approach things, can be hugely beneficial in this space. Then developing an action plan. So again, all these things very much apply to when we're delivering feedback as well. So we don't want to hear that feedback and take in that information and now push it to the back burner. Let's make it actionable. Let's develop SMART goals and construct 90-day commitments around those goals so that we can see success, we can see progress. SMART goals being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. When we start working through this process, we can start seeing progress made on these goals. We can start building on those successes to make new commitments and keep propelling ourselves to a better place. So I have been very fortunate to work with a number of team members through our PATH coaching program and who have done this exercise and seen tremendous success through it. So I cannot speak highly enough about developing an action plan, seeing it through, having that accountability partner to help you along that path and to ultimately get you to where you want to be and to signal that growth. All right, so that brings us full circle. So my hope here today was we were going to make progress on all of these different points. So our first one, survey respondents wanted feedback on a daily or weekly basis. So gratitude tracking, creating habits around providing feedback in real time. That can help us accomplish this, and that can help us make serious headway. We talked about creative ways. Our second one, employees say that they would work harder if they felt their efforts were recognized. So we talk about, creative ways to show praise and show appreciation. The simplest is just calling out the great things that are happening in the moment. You can have programs that, show gratitude, but again, probably the easiest one is just to have that call out. So 92% of respondents agree that giving negative feedback in the right way can improve performance. So we walk through those steps of preparing for a negative feedback conversation and ways to tell how our message is being received, how to create that safe space within the conversation. Next, 41% of employees left a job because they felt they weren't heard, weren't listened to. So remember our call out for promoting dialogue, active listening. These help us build those relationships where people feel comfortable sharing what's on their mind and feel heard. And then lastly, 37% of managers felt uncomfortable giving feedback about employees' performance when they might respond negatively. So we discussed what effective feedback looked like, all of those tools that are kind of in our arsenal that we can deploy. Again, how do we better prepare ourselves for success? How do we learn from these conversations and get better? It's not, you're not going to be great out of the box. Let's learn from it. Let's view this as a journey, not a destination, and get to a place where we are having productive conversation and relaying productive feedback and not necessarily working against ourselves. And again, not making the situation worse, as we definitely can if we're not careful. So that brings us to a conclusion. So thank you all for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I know your time is valuable. I will post a PDF of these slides up on my Twitter feed shortly after we wrap up here. I am an ASP programmer. I am aware that is very retro. Thank you for noticing. I can also be reached. Love to connect with you all on all social media channels. I am a software architect on LinkedIn. For those of you who have tried out Blue Sky, I am at Runyon, RUNYON. And then lastly, mark.runyon@improving.com. So my call out here really is, I want you to be successful in this space. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have now, but I realize that some of this material can be not actionable when you're not in the moment. So if you have a question a day from now, a month from now, a year from now, please reach out. I would love to have the conversation with you and figure out how I can help. So with that, Emily, I will hand to you.
Hello. Well, it looks like we have a couple minutes left. I know you covered it a little bit with some of the other items, but I was hoping you could circle back to the question we had earlier and see if there were any more or any advice for somebody who, if you're in the seat of the person getting the feedback and you're really confused, how to get that information, especially if asking those direct questions or trying to find information maybe isn't working.
So probably the first thing to do is just to kind of an active listening tool is just to repeat back what you've heard. Am I hearing this correctly from you? There's a few things I feel are missing. Can you help me clarify X, Y, or Z? That by doing that kind of active listening exercise of repeating the question or the feedback back to them, there's something weird happens with that, and you can see, well, I didn't mean it that way, or I can see where this wasn't clear. And sometimes that helps the other person to understand, well, I didn't necessarily get that across the way I wanted to. So that can be a good first step. Secondly, it is those questions of what are you unclear on? What are we talking about? I mean, sometimes when I've been in these situations, I almost have to take the reins on the conversation and be like, let's reset. Let's I almost need to take control to say, okay, here's what I'm hearing you saying. What are you meaning here? What are we trying to accomplish? What is our goal? And it may not always be well received by the person I'm talking with, but if I'm not getting what I need, then that is my cue to kind of let's take a little bit more action within this conversation. So, and that becomes a tough part of, I'd love an example so I could just like dig into it and like, okay, let's look at X, and let's dig more into that. Let's ask these questions. That's what kind of puts it into context and makes it real. So.
I am, I definitely appreciate that. I know for myself coming, before getting into consulting and coming from a staffing background, we would often see managers try to give feedback to individuals. And in the course of the feedback, even when individuals had clarifying questions, finding managers get really defensive. I think it's also an important call out, though, is that, us as leaders, and interacting with other leaders, it's very easy for us to need to not just figure out how to take or how to give feedback, but also to take feedback from somebody who really, needs you to have that added clarity.
Yes. Yes, I will agree with you 100%. There's a weird thing that happens with titles and leadership where, and I talked with one of my mentors a while ago that when he became a VP, he felt like conversations stopped happening, that people stopped reaching out to him about certain things, and they weren't comfortable having conversations because of his title. They would have the exact same conversation with him before. That we do have to kind of be careful, and I've run into this as well, kind of when we were going through some difficulties last year of people being worried about their job and things like that. And I heard none of this conversation, but I heard about it after the fact. And I then had conversations with them about please bring this to me next time. I'll be very upfront with you about what's going on and what's happening. But again, if people are afraid to have those conversations, then they're creating their own narrative, a narrative that likely is not true, or has significant gaps. So we need to be careful as leaders to make sure that we're not pushing people away. And when we don't take feedback well, that's essentially what we're doing. We're telling the people in our world that your opinion is not valuable to me. I don't want to hear it. So we do have to be careful.
Great. Well, it looks like we've had a chance to answer all of the questions. in the chat. Did anybody want to raise their hand? I can unmute. You can ask any questions in real time. Wonderful. Well, I think as you noted, it's often important to hear the information, start to digest and understand all of the pieces, and then be able to circle back with some specific experiences, because that can really help address the feedback. Well, Mark, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time today to go over this. This is a topic that is huge. It's one that I think all of our leaders, especially all of our leaders in improving, should hear about. All of our leaders elsewhere. And as you noted, whenever you're providing feedback, there's title involved. Sometimes there's not. So I'm glad that we talked all about that a little bit too. Well, I hope everyone is able to join us next week for Crucial Conversations, Leading with Emotional Intelligence. It's a great segue from the conversation we had today. And then I hope everyone takes some time to reach out to Mark. Again, he is a personal friend of mine and a real expert in this area, and always will make time to have discussions and answer any questions you have. Again, we do this every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central, and this month of March is specifically centered around leadership. So Mark, thank you again for giving your time today. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get this webcast uploaded as well, so you'll have the opportunity to share with anybody else who you think may benefit. Have a wonderful day.